Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a chilling, modern narrative about a stubbornly independent man who actually tried to cheat fate. And more importantly, we're looking at the terrifyingly corporate entity who showed up to collect that debt. You know, we've all heard those classic stories about cheating death, but what happens when the universe operates not on magic, but on strict, inescapable bureaucracy? Well, we are going to explore a fascinating and honestly terrifying story that completely reimagines mortality, human hubris, and the ultimate price of survival. Okay, so let's rethink literally everything we know about how our final moments arrive. Completely forget the spooky folklore, the graveyard fog, all those haunting apparitions. What if the end of your life was handled exactly like a corporate foreclosure? Seriously, what if the entity responsible for closing out your existence was just a guy doing his 9-to-5 job, bound by ledgers, rules, and a perfectly pristine track record? And this stark contrast brilliantly illustrates the terrifying reality of our antagonist, Dominic Deth. Dominic is absolutely not some skeleton hiding in the shadows with a scythe. Instead, picture a guy in a crisp, perfectly tailored charcoal suit carrying a slim leather briefcase. He even goes by the rather polite, formal title of the Dream Messenger. For all intents and purposes, he's a flawless corporate messenger executing a pristine, totally unavoidable process. He represents the cold, uncaring efficiency of the universe. Now, we absolutely must understand the specific rules of Dominic's supernatural bureaucracy to truly grasp the weight of what happens next. His job is remarkably simple, but absolute. Dominic steps into a person's very last dream and hands them a final end-of-life notice. Then he gently presses his thumb to their forehead, causing instant amnesia. And you know, this is actually kind of a mercy. The mortal wakes up for their final few hours on Earth feeling this strange, profound sense of peace, totally unaware that the clock has run out. It's a flawless system, and it always works.
So let's get into round one, the defiance.
Like I said, the system always worked. Until now. Let's travel back to 2018, to a rainy Tuesday night at St. Jude's Hospital, and see exactly how a flawless record gets shattered by sheer human willpower. Here in room 214, we have 70-year-old George Carlsen. His heart monitor is flatlining into that dull, continuous drone. But George is stubbornly independent. He's got a garage full of unfinished projects, and far more importantly, he has a fiercely beloved wife named Peggy. It's this stubborn passion, this intense, burning love for his wife, that absolutely refuses to fade even as his physical body shuts down and the fog of his final dream rolls in. Inside that dream world, Dominic hands George the stark white final notice. But as Dominic reaches out to grant that usual gift of forgetting, George jerks his head back. With a roar of pure defiance, George literally rips the notice in half right there in the dream. He grabs Dominic by his pristine lapels and shouts, "I am willing myself to live." And incredibly, back in the physical world, as the doctors shock his chest, George violently yanks himself back to life in the ICU. Guys, this simply doesn't happen. Mortals do not fight back against the dream messenger. Dominic's supernatural poise just completely cracks. Visibly annoyed and flustered, he snatches the torn pieces of paper back and shoves them into his briefcase. He leaves George with this incredibly ominous, chilling promise. The notice goes back on file, and he does not like being kept waiting. It is a crystal clear warning. George hasn't canceled his fate at all. He's merely delayed it. But George gets exactly what he wanted, right? He beats the Reaper. 8 spectacular years pass by. He travels, fixes up his old cars, and loves Peggy fiercely with the vibrant energy of a man who knows he is living on borrowed time. But time always collects its debts. Those 8 years abruptly expire in 2026, when George finds himself right back in a hospital bed. Which brings us to round 2, the switch. Fasten your seatbelts because we are accelerating into a frantic, high-stakes heist against the universe itself. The fog rolls into George's hospital room once again, but Dominic isn't playing by the same rules this time around. Skipping the dream world entirely, Dominic steps straight into George's sterile hospital room in the waking world, dead of night, casting no shadow. He hands George a fresh, cold envelope and delivers absolute finality with a voice like dry leaves. The extension has expired. Fully confident the job is done, Dominic steps out into the hallway to let the transition happen naturally. Now here is where George's desperate, adrenaline-fueled improvisation kicks in. He knows he has mere seconds. Looking across the hallway, he spots room 215, which is occupied by a man named Don Bellows, who is in a deep, irreversible coma. The pacing here is absolutely frantic. George rips off his own monitors, completely ignores the alarms, and slips out of bed.
He literally unplugs Don Bellows, wheels the comatose man into his own room, room 214, pulls the blankets up, and then hides himself in Don's empty bed across the hall. He essentially swaps their fates.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth could a supernatural entity fall for a simple bed swap? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the fatal flaw in Dominic's bureaucratic nature. You see, Dominic operates entirely on the geometry of fate, the administrative location of a soul, rather than actually looking closely at human faces. He glides back into room 214, reaches down to the man in the bed, and blindly claims the soul of the comatose Don Bellows. Watching through a tiny crack in the door from across the hall, George holds his breath. Suddenly, Dominic's ledger of souls flashes red. An error. A bureaucratic mistake. Dominic realizes he's been tricked and took the wrong soul. His face twists into an expression of absolute, terrifying fury right before he vanishes into thin air, leaving the room freezing cold. Moving to our final section, Cheating Death's final price. The adrenaline fades, the pace slows way down, and we enter the quiet final chapter of George's incredible victory. Or, well, so he thinks. The next few days play out perfectly. The doctors are completely baffled, calling his sudden recovery a medical miracle. 2 days later, George walks through his front door feeling like an absolute legend. He genuinely believes he has conquered death twice. He spends a beautiful, quiet evening with his wife Peggy, watching the sunset, eating dinner, and eventually falling asleep holding hands. He feels entirely victorious. We then arrive at the absolute stillness of the following morning. The bright Washington sun is filtering so warmly through the bedroom curtains. It's this moment of profound quiet, just before the universe balances its ledger. George wakes up, smiles, murmurs his wife's name, and turns to kiss her. And in an instant, George's entire world violently shatters. Peggy is cold. Her eyes are closed, and her face is perfectly peaceful, bearing that exact same peaceful expression granted by the dream messenger's thumb. But her spirit is gone. She passed away silently in the night. A primal roar of pure agony leaves George's throat. He throws himself over her body, weeping uncontrollably, literally begging the universe to take him instead, as he buries his head deep into the pillows. But as his desperate hands grip the tangled bedsheets in his grief, his fingers brush against something stiff. It's a piece of crisp, heavy paper hidden right beneath Peggy's pillow. He pulls it out, and it is an absolute gut punch. It is the exact same end-of-life notice Dominic handed him 8 years ago. But look at the name. George Carlsen is brutally crossed out with a heavy black line. Underneath, written in this erratic, angry scribble, is the name Peggy Carlsen. And right next to it, the ultimate sign of petty, bureaucratic vengeance, a tiny, hand-drawn smiley face in dark ink. Dominic didn't just collect a debt. He brutally exacted interest by taking the very person George fought so incredibly hard to stay alive for. So what you really need to take away from this explainer is the terrifying truth of hubris. The crushing weight of George's arrogance finally comes crashing down on him. He hadn't beaten Dominic Deth. He hadn't pulled off some grand heist against the universe. He had only deferred the payment. And in this cold, supernatural bureaucracy, Deth always collects his interest. You can try to cheat fate all you want, but it will always find a devastating, deeply personal way to make you pay. This story completely flips our understanding of survival and sacrifice on its head. It leaves us staring at a very uncomfortable reality about the rules of the universe that we just might not see. So I'm going to leave you with this final, chilling thought to ponder the next time you turn out the lights. If the dream messenger visited you tonight, briefcase in hand, would you accept the notice, or would you try to cheat the ledger?